The Valori were dying. Everyone in the galaxy knew it. The insect-like creatures had lived peacefully for 10,000 years. They built great libraries. They wrote beautiful poetry. They studied the stars and shared their knowledge freely with anyone who asked. They had never hurt anyone. But the Dravik Empire did not care about peace or poetry or knowledge. The Dravik were hunters. They moved from world to world, taking what they wanted and destroying what they did not need. They had conquered 60 species in the last century alone. Now they wanted the Valori. Ambassador Thelian stood before the Galactic Council, his 4 arms trembling as he spoke. His voice was soft, like wind through leaves. His large compound eyes reflected the lights of 100 holographic displays showing the faces of representatives from across known space. "Please," Thelian said, "we invoke the right of protectorate. Any species may claim us. Protect us, and we will share everything we have. Our libraries, our technology, our loyalty, forever." The chamber was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The Dravik representative, a massive reptilian creature named Voskon, laughed. The sound was ugly, like bones breaking. "No one will help you, little bug. You are already dead. You simply have not stopped moving yet." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy declined. The Meridian Collective was too far away. The Synthesis had no military. The Karathi were afraid. Everyone had a reason. Everyone had an excuse. Thelian felt his heart breaking. 7 billion of his people waited on Valori Prime, hoping for salvation. He had failed them. Then a new voice spoke. "Earth accepts." Everyone turned. In the far corner of the chamber, where the young species sat, a human woman stood. She was small compared to most galactic races. Her skin was brown, her hair was black, and her eyes were calm. Her uniform was simple and blue, marked with the flag of something called the United States Space Force. Her name was Grace Kim, and she held the rank of captain. Moscan laughed again. "The humans? The creatures who only discovered faster than light travel 30 years ago? This is a joke." Grace did not smile. "We do not joke about our word." The Galactic Council erupted in argument. Some said humanity had no right to accept. Others said the rules were clear. Any species could claim protectorate rights. The Dravik representative threatened war against Earth if they interfered. Grace listened to all of it. Then she spoke again. "We accept," she repeated. "Send whatever you want. We will be waiting." 3 days later, a human ship arrived at Valori Prime. It was small and old. Nothing compared to the great warships of the elder races. It carried 400 soldiers and their equipment. David Park was the first to step onto Valori soil. He was 29 years old. His hair was cut short, military style. His face was serious but not unkind. He wore the uniform of a lieutenant in the United States Space Force, and he carried a rifle that looked primitive by galactic standards. Ambassador Thelian greeted him at the landing site. The Valori had prepared a great ceremony, with singers and dancers and offerings of their finest foods. They expected a fleet. They expected generals and admirals. Instead, they got 400 soldiers and a young officer who looked like he had not slept in days. "Lieutenant Park," Thelian said carefully, "we are grateful for your presence, but is this all Earth has sent?" David looked at the ambassador. Then he looked at the sky, where somewhere beyond the clouds, the Dravik were preparing their invasion. "We gave our word," David said simply. "This is what we could send. So this is what we sent." Thelian did not know what to say. He had lived for 200 years. He had met warriors from a dozen species. But he had never heard anyone speak like this human did, as if a promise was more important than survival. "The Dravik will send millions," Thelian said softly. They will burn our cities. They will kill everyone. Laughed Lieutenant. I do not wish your people to die for nothing. David turned to face the ambassador fully. His eyes were strange. They held no fear, but also no arrogance. They held something else, something the Valori did not have a word for. Let me tell you something about humans, David said. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Our world has earthquakes and floods and hurricanes and volcanoes. It has diseases that evolve faster than we can cure them. It has predators that hunted us when we were still living in caves. And you know what we did? Thelian shook his head. We won, David said. We killed the predators. We survived the diseases. We built cities on fault lines and farms in deserts. Our planet did everything it could to destroy us, and we conquered it anyway. He paused. The Dravik think they are scary. They have never met anything like us. That night, the ritual of binding took place. In a chamber deep beneath the Valori capital, David stood in a circle of ancient symbols. Thelian stood across from him, holding a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. This is the obligation of blood, Thelian explained. It is more than a contract. It is a bond between our peoples. You will carry our hopes, our fears, our prayers. They will become part of you, Lieutenant. This cannot be undone. David nodded. I understand. Do you? Thelian asked. Our people have prayed for salvation for 3 years. 7 billion souls, crying out every night for someone to save them. That weight will fall on you now. It may change you. It may break you. David extended his hand. Then let it change me. Let it break me. I will not let your people die. The crystal touched his palm. Light exploded through the chamber. David felt something rush into him, a tidal wave of emotion, of desperate hope, of terror and faith and longing. He felt 7 billion hearts beating in rhythm with his own. For a moment, he could not breathe. Then the light faded. David stood in the darkness, his hand still extended. He looked the same, but something behind his eyes had shifted. On the observation deck above, Captain Grace Kim watched. She had known David for 5 years. She had served beside him in 3 campaigns. She had never seen him look the way he looked now. What did they do to him? Whispered Sergeant Michael Lee, standing beside her. Grace did not answer. She did not know. But she understood, somehow, that the man standing in that chamber was no longer just David Park. He was something else now. Something new. Something dangerous. 2 weeks later, the Dravik arrived. The sky turned black at noon. David stood on a hilltop overlooking the Valori capital and watched the Dravik fleet descend through the clouds. There were thousands of ships, so many that they blocked out the sun completely. The shadows they cast stretched across the land like the fingers of death itself. Beside him, Sergeant Michael Lee counted silently. He stopped counting after 2,000. There was no point. Sir, Michael said quietly. That is a lot of ships. David did not respond. He was listening to something else. Since the binding ritual, he could feel the Valori. He felt their terror now, washing over him like waves on a beach. 7 billion people, hiding in shelters underground, holding their children and praying to gods they no longer believed in. They were counting on him. On 400 humans with rifles and grenades. Get the others, David said finally. We moved to defensive positions in 1 hour. The Dravik landing force hit the ground 5 kilometers from the capital. Massive transport ships opened their doors and poured soldiers onto the Valori. Planes 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors covered in natural armor, carrying plasma weapons that could melt steel. General Vasarak commanded the invasion personally. He was old for a Dravik, nearly 300 years, and he had conquered 11 worlds. He expected this to be his easiest victory yet. The humans have 400 soldiers, his intelligence officer reported. They are positioned around the central temple district. They have no armor, no air support, and no heavy weapons. Vasarak made a sound like grinding stones. It was how his species laughed. Send the first wave. 10,000 should be enough to wipe them out. Save some alive. I wish to study these strange creatures before we move on Earth. The Dravik first wave advanced across the plains in perfect formation. They were professionals, veterans of a dozen campaigns. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. Private Hannah Cho watched them through her rifle scope. She was 22 years old. She had grown up in Los Angeles. She had joined the military because she wanted to see the stars. She had never killed anyone before. Steady, David's voice said through her earpiece. Let them get closer. The Dravik came closer. 500 meters. 400. 300. Hannah's hands were shaking. The enemy soldiers were huge. Their scales glittered in the dim light filtering through the ships above. Their eyes were yellow and cold, like a snake's eyes. Hold, David said. 200 meters. Hannah could see their teeth now. Rows of them, sharp as knives. Hold, 100 meters. She could hear them breathing. Could smell them like copper and rotting meat. Now, the humans opened fire. The Dravik had never seen projectile weapons before. The galaxy had moved past such primitive technology thousands of years ago. Every civilized species used plasma or lasers or particle beams. Bullets were ancient, stupid, ineffective, except they were not. The first line of Dravik soldiers collapsed. The humans were not aiming for their armored chests. They were aiming for joints, for eyes, for the soft tissue under their arms. Decades of fighting on Earth had taught humanity exactly where to hurt things that did not want to be hurt. General Vasarak watched the feeds from orbit. His amusement turned to confusion, then to shock. What are they doing? He demanded. His soldiers were dying. Not just dying, being systematically destroyed. The humans moved through them like water through sand, appearing and disappearing, striking and retreating. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like something else. Corporal James Song held a bridge over a small river. His position was critical. If the Dravik crossed, they could flank the main human line. He was alone. His squad had been killed in the first hour of fighting. 200 Dravik came from the bridge. James did not retreat. He had promised to hold this position, and he would hold it. He fired until his rifle was empty. Then he threw grenades until those were gone. Then he pulled out his knife. When reinforcements finally arrived 6 hours later, they found James still standing on the bridge. His body had taken 11 plasma burns. 3 of his fingers were missing. His left eye was gone. Around him lay 67 dead Dravik. Sir, the medic said, trying to pull him away. Sir, you need to stop. You need medical attention. James looked at him with his remaining eye. Is the bridge secure? Yes, sir. The bridge is secure. Only then did James allow himself to fall. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Private Thomas Kwan rigged captured Dravik weapons to explode, creating traps that killed dozens of enemies. Medic Lilybeak treated wounded Valori civilians in a basement while calling in coordinates for mortar strikes above her head. Sergeant Michael Lee led a squad through enemy lines to destroy a communication tower, fighting hand-to-hand when they ran out of ammunition. By dawn, the Dravik first wave no longer existed. General Vasarak stood on his command ship and stared at the casualty reports. He read them 3 times because he could not believe them. 10,000 Dravik dead. 47 humans dead. This is impossible, he whispered. His second-in-command shifted nervously. Sir, our soldiers report that the humans... They do not stop. They take wounds that should kill them and keep fighting. They smile when they are hurt. Some of them were laughing during combat. Laughing? Yes, sir, laughing. Vasarak felt something he had not felt in 200 years of war. He felt afraid. On the surface, David walked through the aftermath of the battle. He passed Valori civilians emerging from their shelters, staring at the human soldiers with something like wonder in their compound eyes. Dot and old Valori approached him. The creature's carapace was gray with age, and she moved slowly, but her eyes were sharp. "You stayed," she said. "Everyone said you would run, but you stayed." David looked at the bodies of his fallen soldiers. 47. He knew all their names. He could feel their families now, connected to him through the binding parents and children and lovers who would never see them again. "We gave our word," David said. The old Valori studied him for a long moment. Then she knelt, her ancient joints creaking. "Ethan," she whispered. It was a word from the old Valori religion, a word they had not used in centuries. It meant something like divine warrior or god of battle. David shook his head. "I am not a god. I am just a soldier." But even as he said it, he felt the prayers of the Valori rising around him. Millions of voices calling his name, calling him Ethan, calling him Savior. Something stirred inside him. Something that had been planted during the binding ritual. Something that was growing. High above, General Vasarak sent a message to the Dratic Emperor. The message was simple. Send more troops. Send all of them. The humans must be destroyed. But in his hearts, Vasarak knew the truth. He had seen the impossible today. He had seen 400 primitives destroy 10,000 of his best warriors. He was no longer sure the humans could be destroyed at all. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. On 1,000 worlds, creatures of every shape and size watched the recordings from Valori Prime. They saw 400 humans stand against 10,000 Dravake warriors. They saw the impossible victory. They saw a species that should have been crushed rise up and fight like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Ambassador Thelian stood before the assembly once again. But this time, he was not begging for help. This time, the other species were begging him for answers. "What are these humans?" The Meridian representative demanded. "Our scientists have studied the battle footage. What we saw should not be possible. Their soldiers took injuries that would kill any other species and continued fighting. They displayed tactical creativity beyond anything in our databases." Thelian spread his forearms. "The humans come from a world called, perhaps you should, examine the data about their home." The assembly fell silent as the information appeared on their screens. Earth, third. Planet from a medium-sized star. Surface gravity, 1.0 standard units, heavy by galactic norms. Atmosphere, high oxygen content, corrosive to many materials. Climate, extreme variation, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. Tectonic activity, constant. Weather patterns, violent and unpredictable. "This is a death world," someone whispered. "Yes," Thelian said. "The humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. And they did not merely survive. They conquered it. They are apex predators from one of the most hostile environments in known space." The Karathi ambassador leaned forward. "But they are so small, so fragile. They have no natural armor, no claws, no venom." "They do not need those things," Thelian replied. "They have something else. Something far more dangerous." He paused. "They have will, and they do not know how to give up." On Valori Prime, the Dravik Emperor's response arrived. Malika the Undying was the oldest and most powerful Dravik in existence. He had ruled for 600 years, and in that time, he had never lost the war. The defeat on Valori Prime was unacceptable. It was an insult that demanded blood. He sent his elite legion, the Crimson Tide, 500,000 of the finest Dravik warriors, equipped with the best weapons in the Empire. They were led by General Crothel, who had personally executed the leaders of 3 conquered species. "Wipe them out," the Emperor commanded. "Leave nothing alive." Human reinforcements arrived the same day. Colonel Robert Yoon stepped off the transport ship and surveyed the devastation of the previous battle. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and scars on his face from the resource wars on Earth. He had seen terrible things in his life, but he had never seen anything like. David Park. The lieutenant stood at the edge of the landing zone, staring at nothing. His eyes had changed since Robert had last seen him. They were deeper now, older, as if they held centuries instead of years. "David," Robert said carefully. "Good to see you, son." David turned. For a moment, he looked like the young officer Robert remembered. Then the moment passed. "They are coming," David said. 500,000 this time. They will be here in 6 days. Robert frowned. "How do you know that?" "We have not received any intelligence reports yet." David touched his chest. "I can feel it. The Valori are afraid. They can sense the Dravik approaching. And now, so can I, the binding." Robert had heard about it but had not understood what it truly meant. Looking at David now, he began to understand. This was no longer just a man. This was something else. The Crimson Tide landed on the far side of the planet and began their advance. General Crothel expected a siege. He brought heavy artillery, assault vehicles, and orbital strike capabilities. He would crush the humans with overwhelming force, reducing their defensive positions to ash. Instead, he found nothing. "Where are they?" Crothel demanded, surveying the empty battlefield. They were supposed to be defending the capital. His scouts spread across the terrain. They found abandoned positions, discarded equipment, signs of recent activity. But no humans. Then, on the 3rd night, the attacks began. A Dravik supply convoy vanished. No distress signal. No survivors. Just empty vehicles and blood on the ground. A communications post went silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the entire garrison dead, killed by blade wounds. Not plasma fire. A fuel depot exploded in the middle of the night. Sabotage. But no one had seen anyone. Approach. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They struck at night, during storms, in the moments when the Dravik thought they were safe. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts. Private Hannah Cho led a squad through enemy territory for 2 weeks. They slept during the day, buried under debris. They hunted at night, killing Dravik patrols and vanishing before anyone could respond. She learned to move without sound, to kill without hesitation. She learned to smile in the darkness. Engineer Thomas Kwan studied captured Dravik weapons and built something new. The Dravik used plasma technology, and humans used projectile weapons. Thomas combined them, creating rifles that fired plasma-enhanced bullets. They should not have worked. The physics did not make sense, but they worked anyway. "How did you do this?" General Kim asked, examining the prototype. Thomas shrugged. "I just felt what it needed to be. Like the answer was already inside me. The Valori prayers were doing something to them. The binding was changing them all. Medic Lilybeak set up a hospital and underground cave system. She treated human soldiers and Valori civilians side by side, working 20 hours a day without rest. Her hands moved faster than they should have. Her diagnoses were always correct. "You are becoming like him," a Valori nurse whispered to her one night. "Like the Ethon. Like Lieutenant Park." Lily looked at her hands. They were steady. They had not trembled in weeks. "Maybe," she said. Is that bad? The nurse considered the question. I do not know, but I think the gods would not have chosen you if you were not worthy. General Crothall sent increasingly desperate reports to the Emperor. His army was being eaten alive. Not by direct combat, by 1,000 cuts, by constant pressure, by enemies who refused to fight fair. They booby-trapped their own dead, he wrote. They learn our language and broadcast propaganda that makes our soldiers doubt their purpose. They appear inside our secured facilities without anyone seeing them enter. I have lost 50,000 soldiers in 2 months, and I have not seen a single human body. The Emperor's response was cold. You have 500,000 warriors. Use them, Crothall tried. He launched massive assaults on suspected human positions. He bombed cities, burned forests, poisoned water supplies. He did everything he could think of. It made no difference. The humans simply adapted. They moved faster, hit harder, found new ways to kill. It was as if the more the Dravik threw at them, the stronger they became. On the 6-month anniversary of the invasion, David Park walked into General Crothall's command center. Alone, the Dravik guards did not see him coming. One moment the room was secure. The next moment, a human stood in front of the general, covered in blood that was not his own. You are General Crothall, David said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Crothall reached for his weapon. David moved faster than any creature should be able to move and broke the general's arm in 3 places. Your Crimson Tide is finished, David said. Your supply lines are cut. Your communications are compromised. You have 2 choices, surrender or die. Crothall stared at the human. This small, fragile creature that should not have been a threat to anyone. He saw the eyes, ancient eyes, burning eyes, eyes that held the prayers of 7 billion souls. What are you? Crothall whispered. David considered the question. The truth was, he no longer knew. He had stopped sleeping months ago. He saw the battlefield in his dreams, even though he did not dream anymore. He felt every Valori life on this planet, and he would protect them all. I am what you made me, David said finally. I am what happens when you threaten people under my protection. General Crothall, who had executed the leaders of 3 civilizations, who had never known fear, dropped to his knees. I surrender. He said that the Crimson Tide was destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Not a single soldier made it off Valori Prime. Across the galaxy, species began to whisper a new name. Ethon, the war, God, the human who could not be stopped. And on the Dravik homeworld, Emperor Maliki the Undying began to understand that 3 years had passed since the first Dravik ship darkened the skies of Valori Prime. The war had spread across the galaxy. What began as a simple defense had become something much larger. The Dravik Empire, which had conquered 60 species, was now fighting for its survival. And David Park was no longer a lieutenant. The United Nations had formed the Terran Expeditionary Force, combining the militaries of every nation on Earth into a single army. They had built ships, trained soldiers, and learned from the technology the Valori shared with them. Humanity had become a galactic power in 3 short years. David commanded it all. Supreme Commander of Human Forces. The title felt strange to him, like wearing clothes that belonged to someone else. But no one else could do what he did. No one else could feel the war the way he felt it. He stood on the bridge of the flagship Unconquered, staring at a star map that showed the current state of the conflict. Red dots marked Dravik territory. Blue dots marked human and allied positions. The blue was advancing, pushing deeper into enemy space every month. Sir, Major Daniel Shin approached carefully. He was David's second in command, a quiet man who had served beside David since the beginning. We received the latest casualty reports. The assault on the Dravik shipyards was successful. We destroyed 70% of their production capability. David nodded. He already knew. He had felt the battle through the binding, felt every human death like a knife in his chest. How many did we lose? David asked. Daniel hesitated. 4,000, sir. 4,000. David closed his eyes and saw their faces. He did not know how, but he knew every single one of them now. Their names, their hopes, their final moments. The binding had grown beyond the Valori. It connected him to every human soldier under his command. It was killing him. Slowly, piece by piece. Sir, Daniel said softly, when did you last sleep? David opened his eyes. I do not sleep anymore. That is not possible. Humans need sleep to survive. I am not sure what I am anymore, Daniel. David turned back to the star map. The Valori prayers change me. Every day, I become less human and more something else. I can feel the war constantly. Every battle, every death, every victory. It never stops. Daniel did not know what to say. He had watched David transform over the years from a young officer into something that frightened even his eyes. The other species called him Ethon, the war god. His own soldiers whispered that he could see the future, that he could not be killed, that he was no longer mortal. Looking at David now, Daniel wondered if any of it was true. General Grace Kim arrived on the Unconquered 3 days later. She had spent the last year commanding operations in the outer territories, pushing the Dravik back from 7 different star systems. She had won every battle, but she had not seen David in 6 months, and when she finally stood before him, she barely recognized him. He was thinner now. His hair had gray streaks that had not been there before. His eyes were wrong. They looked like they contained something vast and terrible, something that no human should have to carry. David, she said carefully, you look like death. I feel like death. He almost smiled. Almost. The Valori say I have taken too much of the binding. I carry too many souls now. Human and Valori both. They say my body cannot hold much more. Grace felt her chest tighten. Then stop. Let someone else take command. You have done enough. There is no one else. David gestured at the star map. I can see patterns that others cannot see. I know where the Dravik will strike before they decide to strike. If I stop now, we lose the war. Millions die. And if you continue, what happens to you? David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. I do not know. The Valori have legends about this. About warriors who took too much of the binding and became something other than themselves. They say those warriors won their wars. They also say those warriors could never return to normal life afterward. He paused. They say some of them stopped being alive in any way that mattered. Grace stepped forward and took his hand. It was cold, much colder than a living hand should be. David, please, there has to be another way. He looked at her with those ancient, terrible eyes. There is no other way. I made a promise. I accepted the obligation. This is what it costs. The next month, the Terran Expeditionary Force struck at the heart of Dravik territory. David led the assault personally, commanding from the front lines of every major battle. His presence alone was worth 10,000 soldiers. Dravik troops fled when they saw his ship approaching. Their commanders surrendered rather than face him in combat. Admiral Stephen Hong, commanding the fleet's eastern wing, watched David's ship tear through enemy formations like a knife through paper. How is he doing that? Stephen asked his tactical officer. Those maneuvers should be impossible. He is predicting their movements before they make them. Sir, I do not think he is predicting anything. The tactical officer's voice was shaking. I think he is controlling them somehow, making them afraid. They are not running because they are losing. They are running because they cannot think clearly when he is near. It was true. The binding had changed David in ways that went beyond physical enhancement. He could project fear now, overwhelming terror that crashed into enemy minds like a wave. He could sense intentions, feel the moment before a decision was made. He was becoming something the galaxy had never seen. A weapon in human form. A god of war. Colonel Robert Yoon found David after the battle, standing alone in a corridor of the Unconquered. The old soldier approached slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. "David, talk to me." David did not turn around. "I can feel them dying, Robert. Every soldier we lose. I feel them go. Their last thoughts. Their final moments. I carry all of it. That is too much for any person to bear. I'm not sure I am a person anymore." David finally turned. His eyes were wet. "I remember being David Park. I remember having hopes and fears and dreams. But those memories feel like they belong to someone else now. Someone who died a long time ago." Robert stepped closer. "Then who are you?" David considered the question. On some level, he knew the answer. He was Ethan now, the war god, the living prayer of 7 billion Valori and billions more humans who believed in him. He was not a man anymore. He was a symbol, a weapon. "I am the obligation," David said finally. "I am the promise we made. I will exist until the promise is fulfilled. And then?" David smiled. It was the saddest smile Robert had ever seen. "Then I do not know if there will be anything left." On the Dravik homeworld, Emperor Malika the Undying called his final war council. His empire was crumbling. His fleets were scattered. His armies were broken. "We cannot win this war," his advisors told him. "The humans are too strong. Their war god cannot be stopped." Malika rose from his throne. He was ancient, the oldest Dravik alive, and he had never accepted defeat. "Then we will make them pay for their victory," he said. "Call every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We will make our final stand at Draken, and we will take as many of them with us as we can." The final battle was coming, and David Park, the man who had become a god, prepared to face it. He knew it might be his last thought. He was not sure he cared anymore. The Dravik homeworld of Draken was a fortress. Emperor Malakar had gathered every remaining ship in his empire, 200,000 vessels forming a wall around the planet. On the surface, billions of Dravik civilians waited for the end. Knowing that victory meant survival and defeat meant extinction, David stood on the bridge of the Unconquered and looked at the enemy fleet through the viewport. So many ships. Even after 3 years of war, the Dravik still outnumbered humanity 4-1. General Grace Kim stood beside him. "We can win this, but it will cost us. I know." David closed his eyes and reached out through the binding. He felt 50,000 human ships behind him, each one crewed by men and women who had followed him across the galaxy. He felt the Valari watching from their homeworld, praying for victory. He felt the weight of everything he had become. "Grace," he said quietly, "when this is over, I need you to take command." She turned sharply. "What are you talking about? I cannot come back from this. Whatever I do today, whatever I become to win this battle, there will be nothing left of me afterward." He opened his eyes. "I need you to lead them home." Grace wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that everything would be fine, that they would return to Earth together when the war was over. But she looked at his face and saw the truth. The man she had known was already gone. What remained was the Ethon, the war god, a being of pure purpose and will. And that being would do whatever it took to fulfill its promise. "I understand," she said finally. Her voice cracked. "David, thank you for everything." He almost smiled. Almost. "Tell them I was just a soldier. Tell them I kept my word." That is all I want to be remembered for. The battle began at dawn. Human ships crashed into the Dravik formation like a hammer striking stone. Admiral Stephen Hong led the assault on the eastern flank, his vessels moving in patterns that should have been impossible to coordinate. Colonel Robert Yoon commanded the ground forces, dropping soldiers onto Dravik defense platforms to disable their weapons. But the center of the battle belonged to David. The Unconquered tore through enemy lines like a creature possessed. David did not command his ship through normal means anymore. He was connected to it, bonded to it the way he was bonded to everything else. The ship moved as an extension of his will, dodging attacks before they were fired, striking weak points that no sensor could detect. The Dravik crews watched in horror as a single human vessel destroyed dozens of their ships in minutes. What is that thing? A Dravik commander screamed. How do we stop it? They could not stop it. Nothing could stop it. David had given up the last pieces of his humanity, and in return, he had become something beyond mortal limits. Emperor Malachar watched from his throne room as his fleet crumbled. 600 years of conquest. 60 conquered species. An empire that had terrified the galaxy. All of it falling apart because of one human. Hail him, Malachar commanded. I wish to speak with this war god. David's face appeared on the Emperor's screen. He looked calm, peaceful, almost empty. His eyes held no anger, no hatred, no triumph. They held only purpose. Emperor Malachar, David said, your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are broken. You can surrender now and save your people, or you can continue fighting and watch them die. The choice is yours. Malachar studied the human. He had expected arrogance. He had expected cruelty. Instead, he saw something far more frightening. He saw a being that did not care about victory or glory. A being that simply existed to fulfill a single purpose, to protect. Why? Malachar asked. Why did you fight so hard for those insects? They are nothing. Weak, useless creatures who could not defend themselves. Why did you sacrifice everything for them? David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held a trace of the man he had once been. Because they asked for help. And we gave our word. Malachar laughed bitterly. Your word? You destroyed an empire for a word? Yes. David's expression did not change. That is what words mean to us. That is what promises mean. You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous, Emperor. It is not our weapons. It is not our tactics. It is that when we say we will do something, we do it. No matter the cost. The Emperor stared at him. And for the first time in 600 years, Malachar the Undying felt truly afraid. I surrender, he said. The war ended in 14 hours. Dravik ships dropped their weapons and powered down their engines. Soldiers laid down their arms and waited for human forces to take them prisoner. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries ceased to exist in a single day. On Valori Prime, the news arrived at sunset. Ambassador Thelian stood in the same chamber where the binding ritual had taken place 3 years before. Around him, billions of Valori celebrated, singing, dancing, embracing each other in joy. They were free. After years of terror, they were finally free. But Thelian did not celebrate. He was watching a holographic transmission from the Unconquered. David Park sat alone in his quarters. He looked older than he should have, aged decades in just 3 years. His hands were trembling. His eyes were distant. It is done, David said. The war is over. Your people are safe. Thank you, Thelian said. We can never repay what you have given us. David shook his head slowly. I did not give anything. I just kept a promise. And what now? What happens to you? David looked at his hands. The trembling was getting worse. He could feel the binding starting to break. the weight of 7 billion souls beginning to lift from his shoulders. Without the war to sustain him, without the purpose that had kept him going, he was falling apart. "I do not know," he admitted. "I am not sure there is enough of me left to have a future." Thelian felt his heart breaking. This human had sacrificed everything for people he had never met, people who were not even his own species. He had given up his humanity, his identity, his very self all to keep a word. "Come home," Thelian said. "Come to Valori Prime. Let us care for you." David smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from him in years. "Maybe," he said. I think I would like that." 1 month later, a ceremony was held on Valori Prime. Billions gathered to honor the humans who had saved them. Admiral Stephen Hong, Colonel Robert Yoon, General Grace Kim, Major Daniel Shin, all the officers and soldiers who had fought and bled and died for a species not there. On, David Parks stood at the front. He looked different now. Smaller, somehow. More human. The terrible weight in his eyes had faded, replaced by something softer. The binding was releasing him slowly, letting him become a man again instead of a god. Ambassador Thelian placed a crystalline medallion around David's neck, the mantle of the Eternal Guardian, the highest honor the Valori could give. "You have given us our future," Thelian said. "What can we give you in return?" David looked out at the crowd. Valori and humans standing together, laughing and crying and holding each other. A union that had started with obligation had become something much deeper. "Remember us," he said. "Not as gods, not as weapons. Remember us as what we really are." And what is that? David thought about the question. He thought about everything he had been through, everything he had lost, everything he had become. And he found his answer in the simplest truth. "Stubborn," he said. "Just incredibly stubborn people who refuse to break their word." Thelian laughed. It was a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Yes," the ambassador said. "I think we will remember that. I think the galaxy will remember that for a very long time." Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Species discovered the stars and faded into history. But the story of the war, God of Valori Prime, never died. They told it on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000 languages. The story of a soldier who accepted an impossible obligation, who became something more than human to protect creatures he had never met, who won an unwinnable war and asked for nothing in return, except to be remembered as a man who kept his word. Some said he was a god. Some said he was a legend. Some said he never existed at all. But the Valori knew the truth. They had watched him fight. They had felt his burden through the binding. They had seen him sacrifice everything, become everything, just to keep a simple promise, and they never forgot what he said on the day the war ended, when asked what made humans so dangerous. He had answered with one word, "Stubborn." The galaxy learned to respect that word, to fear it, to admire it, because humans never broke their promises, no matter the cost, no matter the price, until the very end.